Good afternoon from our studio in Amsterdam. Before I introduce our special guest, just some housekeeping explanation for those of you who've never used this system. Below, there are three emojis. If you want to clap, you press the clapping emoji. If you find it brilliant, you press the light bulb, or if something funny, you press the other emoji. If you have a comment or question, just type it in the lower right or left-hand corner, depending on your screen. And if you need to send a private message to anyone in the room, just move your mouse, just click on the tab at the top, people, and you'll see everyone in the room. And then you can just move your mouse over their name, and a window will pop up, and you can send them a private message, and we'll have a virtual mixer at the end. I'm really thrilled today because I have a dear friend, Bert-Ola Bergstrand, who I often call the Forrest Gump of the social capital movement, because you always see him everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's an earthquake in Turkey, he's there. If it's a social gathering in the north of Finland, he's there, or in Latin America. I always see him everywhere. So I'm always impressed. And he's one of the most brilliant people, and also one of the most generous people that I've ever met. So, Bert-Ola, thank you so much. For those of you that don't, for the audience that don't know who you are, what you do, particularly in the area of social capital, give a kind of brief journey from international rock climber to super connector.
Thanks for those words. I think I'm not. Rock climbing was many years back. I think 25 years and 25 kilos. So, but it's great. Someone just called me. No, I mean I'm here in the heart of Sweden, as I say, in Östersund right now. It's in the very central part of Sweden, North Europe, for you who know Sweden. And I grew up in a small village with just a few hundred people. So I think what we will discuss today, social capital or relationships, communities, dear to my heart. And I grew up with it, like in football and sports and civil society organization. So I've been to like living this field of social capital from early days till now, plus 50. Theory and practice in different types of organizations, in business, in civic society, in public organization, trying both to understand social capital and also to see how I can use understanding and my relations to in some way impact the world. And yeah, luckily I have been in many occasions that I can at least do some kind of impact. It's always a matter of is it big, or we can probably go into that if how much does this create or whatever. So I think for me it's most important to do things that I feel is meaningful, and people and culture has always been I think my passion in life has been to meet people and to understand different cultures. When I grew up, I looked at maps from an early days about the world. My grandmother and grandfather, even up here in North Sweden, many people didn't travel that much in the 70s when I grew up, but they were very interested in education and how they could travel and see other places. So that influenced me a lot, I think, from today to get an interest of everything from, like you said, Latin America to Asia to different places. And I wanted to explore this. I think that is where it started, and things have evolved ever since.
Um, I want to really dive deep into the whole issue of social capital, from selfie
Yeah,
chasing,
yeah,
everybody's selfie
yeah.
chasing on Instagram, which I don't get that because I don't do that very often, um, to actual engaging people to form a community.
Yeah.
And okay, you can form the community. We've done that through another platform and this, but actually getting people to engage, share, be generous, what is the trigger to do that? Because everybody, there's an old expression in New York, and everybody wants to come to the party, but nobody wants to bring the chairs.
Mm. Um, so the question is how to build community or
How
why
to
or
build community that actual has engagement, because you've got two types of people, maybe four or five. One who
mm,
want to engage and connect and share and,
yeah, yeah.
and build that, and another group that says, okay, I'm at the
Yeah.
theater, perform,
Mm.
and I'm
But
going to
but
sit
let's
back
start
and
with
watch.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But let's maybe start a little bit why social capital or what because that will go in bring us into community. It's part of, as I see, what social capital is. And social capital, I by the way, I shared a link in the chat here to an active YouTube channel where you find a lot of recent videos. So this is a quite active forum right now. So you will find everything from social capital in business, social capital in civic society, how you defined it, how you measure it, everything. So go there if you want a deeper look into what social capital is, and it's very good and active right now. So social capital for me is very much about the idea is that better together. We can achieve more together than alone. That's the essence of social capital. And I know Colin Campbell is here, a good friend. He was one of the first I met in the social capital field, assist social capital in Scotland. Daniel Basil is here from Chicago. So I can see from the people joining that we have a lot of experts, so they can also share links there about social capital. So this is my view on social capital there. But I think most people would agree that social capital is about doing things together, doing some things that have an impact on society, a collective impact. But you can also do it from an individual perspective, what do we say, egocentric networks. How do I benefit from a network? But my take on social capital is more collective social capital. How can you impact a neighborhood or a group or a team or maybe even a region and so forth? So some collective doing things together style. And it's deeply rooted, of course, in the human evolution. I think this is how it stands out from people. How do we differ from animals as a species? I mean, this is how we create things. So social capital is very much about creation, also the human capacity to create something. So that's the starting point of why social capital. And as you can hear, it also has two parts. It's the social part and it's the capital part. So it's also some kind of, if you look at capital theory, that it has some kind of surplus value. When you do things, you create more of it. And you also can have some kind of return. And that's what we often speak about. How do we measure impact or how do we measure social capital? And there's a lot to be discussed around that part. But it is some kind to make it a capital, it needs to be something that you can invest in, that it's something out there. And that would be the bit different definition on who you speak with what is this. So that's a bit of the starting point. Coming to community, how do you build community? To build social capital, I think the essence there is to create spaces where people want to be. When I speak about leadership and building community, that's number one, to create the enabling conditions for, you can say, convening. So and if people for building a space where people want to be, you can go to yourself if you go to a great conference or if you go to whatever, where you attract is people want to be where they are seen, where they can fulfill a role, where the people say, welcome, I can see you, what can you offer here? So I think to build a community, if you don't design spaces like that, regardless of if it's physical or digital, it will not work. John Hagel, as I think you know, for example, he and John Seely Brown wrote 12, 13 years back a book, The Power of Pull, instead from push to pull. And it's very much about how do you pull people into a place? How do you build a place where people want to be, where you feel belongingness to each other? It's not that you push out here, I want to sell something. It's more, I want to be here and be seen and contribute. So that's the dilemma, I think, with coming into money, when we can go into that later, probably, you said. But are you here to sell something, or are you here to share something? And that's a bit paradoxical in here, because you need to survive also in this, in building this social capital. So it's not easy, but I gave you some elements of what I think is social capital and the essence there.
Everybody's looking for some type of tribe, whether, a big football stadium to support, a team, which I'm not a football fan, so I don't get that, or a small community. Yet I see lots and lots of people who, over the last 25 years that we've been to TBLI, very keen on consuming but not participating.
Yes.
And how do you kind of filter that out or incentivize people? We've been looking at sophisticated DAOs, centralized autonomous organizations, to incentivize those that are engaging and not and kind of pull people out that are just not engaging, that just want to be consuming. So
I think,
are people willing to make an effort?
yes, but to build community, you need someone who take, often a social entrepreneur or system entrepreneur, or whatever term we are using, who takes the lead in establishing or convening these places, the spaces where people want to be. So the role there is to be a good system entrepreneur, like I see myself, is that you need to constantly be out and listen to people. What are people up to? What do they need to do? What they want to do? What's the meaning of people? That's like when you catch that, that's then you can start to build something when you have that relation. So that's like entrepreneurship in community building. You need to be out there. You can't just, now I want to start a community and push it in there. You see what I mean? You need to be there, you need to feel the energy there to create the space. And then you start to look, okay, what tool do I need? Do I need this social media platform? Is it LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp? Or it's like, but it starts with being out there and like listen. I say listen to the vibes, the energy there. And then you start to enable a space. It can be a Facebook group, it can be a LinkedIn group or something, and start to invite people into that conversation and facilitate it. So that's the starting point. And if you miss that you, like I said, if you're more of a seller, now I want to sell, that's why you open. People feel that. So it's more that you like nudge people and invite them to the party, you said. And some people, based on my experience, they are more, what you can say, passive. They maybe are a bit more introvert, and other people want to be on the stage. And like, that's how it is, at least the people I met over the years. So I think it's normal in the, what you say, the bell curve, how people, so you will have people, we are different as a people. So it's more of to be good conveners, to see the people who don't want to go to others and speak, maybe so do you get them to be welcoming into the room. So that's a large part of it, to get to this belonging. How do you belong to a group? today's, if we speak about the TikTok community, or 2 years back we had a platform called Clubhouse,
Yeah.
social audio, very active. And there was a lot of discussion on what is a community when you speak about influencers. And in the influencer world, a community can be that you have 2 million followers, and it's difficult to have a conversation with 2 million followers.
No.
So it's sort of how do you belong to a community where one person is in the spotlight? Do you belong to that community? It's very difficult. So it's also some different qualities here. What do we mean by community? What do we mean by network? For me, community has a life. It has a soul. It's something that you can belong to. Network can be more looking at infrastructure or the electronic grid of a power grid. That can be a network, but it maybe don't have the life. That's how I differ a community to a network. But still, it is, of course, a network structure with different hubs, with different architecture that connects the different spots or hubs, what you say, in the network. But community has this element of belonging into it, that I feel part of it. If you wake up in the night in a community and say, I need some help, people will feel that and help you. So that's a good way of measuring the quality of a community. Will someone be there to support you? And is it spread, or is it decent, or is it just a few people can get help? So if I want to build a great community, that is how I would like to try to design and measure to get people to have a voice in the community, build this like values of being supportive and be there for each other, and find some kind of measurement tools to see, are we helpful to the community? So that was a lot of stuff into you at the
No,
same
no,
time
no,
here. That
no. This is excellent. We're also getting lots
I'm
of
just
good comments.
rambling here, so you
No,
need to stop
that's
me. And
fine. That's what community. But I still personally
yeah,
struggle with like I stopped going to conferences, even though we've done 40 international summits over
yeah,
the
yeah,
years. I stopped going to other people's conference except for one, the Sweden Food Tech Mini, because my friend is
mm,
organizing that.
yeah,
And every one that I went to, every single one, even though there were nice selfies,
yeah, yeah,
and hugging and all of this and,
yeah.
enjoying each other, there was no follow up or response or
Yes,
anything that came out of that. It's not about
yes,
selling, it's about,
yeah, 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 yeah,
feeling, sharing, or whatever. No response. And
yes.
how do you filter out the noise?
That's not so easy, I think, because noise in this case is people. So it's also, I mean, information in general, but data is also how I see it. Data, information, knowledge comes with the people.
Hmm.
So knowledge and the people are intertwined in the same package. So filtering, I don't like to use that word maybe when people,
Okay.
but you need a way to deal with people in a nice way. So you will not like all people. That's where values like tolerance come into the picture.
Hmm.
A good open society have a high tolerance for people who don't like you. You will bump into people all the time that don't like what you say, and
Sure.
that's sort of the rules you need to design this game for. I would say be as open as possible to invite people, and then concentrate on the people you want to build something with. The problem with if you close communities too much is that the smartest people is always or often outside the room.
Right.
So when I started my PhD many years back at School of Business, I had a professor one in accounting and one in organization theory. And this guy in organization theory said that when you go out and start to look at communities and networks, of course you should look at the people in the room, but learn to identify the border of the place, because it's always a border around community, but they are not seen. Maybe it's not the physical door to the space. It might be mental borders, or who do we invite here? Learn to see these borders, because around borders often things happen. So that's also part of building a good community, to learn to see the unseen when it comes to relation and networks and communities there. And as you can never be, you will learn the whole life. I'm still learning all the time from people, and new ways of how can we look at networks and like that. It's like building a house, you need they are very skilled in building houses, but to build relations, it's the same. It's and maybe even more difficult. Coming into measurement, for example, often you say, what's the value of social capital? And I can say that if you look at, unfortunately, often social capital valuation is based on alternative cost of what does not work. So you can take, for example, the war between Russia and Ukraine. Mm-hmm. That's not good relations. So at a high level, it's the social capital that doesn't work. And what value are destroyed in the war? You can start to think from killing people, misunderstanding, infrastructure. That's the social capital value. Not all of it, of course, there will be other type of values also, but you see what I mean? It's the relations, that's the social capital. And that's only one part of the value. You also have the creative potential of what we could do together. So it's two values that are missed there. It's the destruction of institutions and relations, and the creative potential of doing something together. And unfortunately, we see the value of social capital when it does not work, because then you have a problem. And the worst problem would be a war. But how do we invest in relations that work? How can we improve that capacity? That's a bit challenge of investing in overall in impact. If we look at impact business, and you have been in the field for a long time of impact investing, what is impact? I think this is one of the things that it's often intangible values that we deal with, and it's very difficult to measure, and maybe not always it should be measured also. So that's a few more inputs. So ask and I will continue.
I was always impressed every time I met you at an event, is that you were always accessible, generous, sharing. It didn't matter who or what was happening around you. You always were happy to share your social capital and not sell and share. Having worked in one of the most toxic industries in the world and continue the financial sector, and it's where I see, particularly in the impact space, those who talk the most do the least, and those who do the least talk the most. It gets very frustrating because we're trying to change that financial system to keep that attitude that you have of everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome. I don't care what your background, whether you're Putin or Xi Jinping or whatever. Come on in. So how do you do that?
It's not so easy. So that would be, but it helps if you are interested in people and culture, like I said from beginning, because if you have a bit research interest, it's also curiosity of why people behave in different things. So, but it's hard to to deal maybe with people who feel that they are using you or whatever. What happens is more that you will go to people who you want to be with. So it's maybe that's the answer. Focus on the people who you want to do things with, and don't think too much. Or it's also realization when you want to be a convener or build communities or maybe thousands of people and like that, you will have people there who will not fit with you for one or another reason. It may be because of you or the other, or other circumstances. So it's part of the game. I can't explain it better in a better
But
way.
I mean, we just because we've been doing this a long time, we have a massive network and getting lots and lots of people who want to engage. So on the one hand, you're saying, share and welcome, and that. At the other
Mm,
side, you're saying filter out the noise, but you've got
mm,
to let in the noise before
mm.
you can filter it
Yeah.
out.
Yes, because it's like when you see the flowers, you can the potential there, the start. That's why the starting point is so incredibly important. If you want to frame a question or a space or something, if you have the wrong mix in the beginning, you can't do much about it. And if you open the gates, you will have some, what you say in English, ogräs, we say in Swedish. It's like things that is between the plants.
Right. Weeds.
Yeah, yeah. So, this is how it works. So it's like if you want a nice garden, it will be like that. But you're probably not the convener, or if you don't like people or to have conversation, it's other because people are different. Some
Yeah.
people want to
I
be
get
very
I think I
specific
get
and
disappointed. Maybe my
mm, mm.
expectations are too high.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But it's also a choice of when you build community. The last 10, 15 years, I've been looking a lot into digital communities. I have a book shared here for you, The Virtual Society. I can recommend it.
Hmm.
So when I started 20 years back, it was a lot of physical communities. And then it has moved more and more to digital communities. And it's an evolving process with new technologies and everything. So that's my small academic contribution, and this is try to figure out what's the difference or similarities between physical and digital spaces. I think overall it's quite similar, I would say, but there are differences also in terms of maybe expectations and size of communities and like that. I'm not 100% like what are the numbers. We have this sort of Dunbar figure of 150 people that you can have connection with. For example, what does friendship in the digital community mean? I think, just to give one example, I think friendship or sort of friendship digital can be that you are connected. I see people here in the our forum right now.
Hmm.
There are people here I never met and other people I met, but still I feel connected. And some, it's not like every day I wake up and send them a messenger note that how do
Mm.
you feel today? It's more like a friendship that maybe in 3 years I will come down to Uganda or Tokyo or something. Maybe we can do things. And then you activate. And that's maybe not the friendship you had in the physical world, so to say. It's more like these norms of you go out in the weekend and do things together. So there are some similarities, but there are also some differences between digital and physical spaces. But I think that's where we're moving in this with the new worlds, with the new technologies, that spaces are not only physical. They will definitely be, as I see, there will be many tools and many spaces that grow together that will have real implication in the physical world. So whatever it is. If now the latest is AI, before it was blockchain, it's social currencies. It's the whole infrastructure being built while we're speaking at the same time now. It's in building. Yeah.
All right. So brave new world's coming at us from many, many ways.
Mm,
Virtual VR
mm,
headsets,
mm, mm, yeah.
face to face. Since COVID, you
Mm,
had pre-COVID, during
mm,
COVID, post-COVID.
mm.
It seems much more challenging
Yes.
to
Yes.
engage post-COVID. What happened?
Mm, mm. Well, the space, people were forced, as I see it, they were forced into digital space. It
Mm,
was a time before COVID and a time after in terms of digital spaces and uh, platforms like this. So before COVID, I think many people here in this conversation, they were digital years before that, indeed, meaning in that we met in digital communities and Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. But now the large part of population, if we take the bell curve again,
mm,
the 70% maybe, they were forced into the digital world.
okay.
And with that, the space is much smaller because everyone wants a part of this. And then the competence have developed is more professional now. So many people through the companies needing to take some course.
Mm,
How to build community became cool. You need a Facebook page, you need a Twitter page, so suddenly everyone have a community or want a community or something. So it's harder to reach out because everyone is occupied also with their own communities. So that's so high professionalization and more people doing different groups and different links. And that has also impacted the social media platforms. So they give less space now in reach. So you can see on the logarithm, for example, before you had maybe the first 10 minutes, you have quite like the golden few minutes to share a post, and then over 1 hour it's quite okay, and then it goes down over the coming 24 hours. That space is much more narrow today than it was a few years back. So the overall trend is that's harder to reach out, to get hold, and to build your community. So that's my assessment around that. I think it will continue. So if you want to, the implication of this is you need to be you need to learn how to do it even more if you want to build a community. Like I said to you, I would go for more building valuable relationships with people instead of building your own community because it's extremely time consuming.
mm,
So if you don't like it, because I personally, always had an interest in people and culture. So why not bring them together? It's perfect. I can have the world here, and sometime I speak with them. So, but if you don't have this drive, it costs too much time. That
mm,
would be my input because I will not say how many hours I have. I have my fingers are, because you like so many posts. So that's one of the new working, let's say, problem because you need to be active all over the place to keep it alive. Social capital is, I would say, it's about action. How social capital differ from other capital, like financial capital, human capital, is that social capital is action related. It's typically action related, and it's how it differs from other capitals. And you need to be active, see it as a living system because it's what it is. So you need to be there all the time, otherwise you lose the capital. So also be aware of this when you go in. So as a starting point for a beginner, if you want to build social capital, decide how much time you want to spend in social capital investment, if you use that word.
mm,
Decide. It's one way to look at it. Is it 10 hours a week or
mm,
10 hours a day,
mm.
like I normally invest maybe on average? So that means like I can honestly say I probably invested between 40 and 60 hours effective time the last 15 years in building social capital.
40 or 60 hours totally?
A week, yeah.
A week.
So
Okay.
a week.
Wow.
So it's full time. It's more than full time, but I don't want to look at it as like it's a work. It's difficult to see it as work for me, but but you need to be aware of how time consuming it is to be there. But and here's another book, by the way, that I encourage you. Brilliant Networking with Steven de Souza. A lot of tips how to build networks and communities, very pragmatic. But be aware that it will take some time. But you can accomplish a lot with a few hours a week. You don't need to be a nerd investing all your time into build community. But since it's so hard to build community after COVID, I would really think before I want to build the best thriving communities. A lot of words out there. It should be a thriving community. What does it take to build a thriving community? It requires a lot. Because you said earlier that what happens after a nice event, because
Yeah.
we live in this event world. And you saw the headline from social capital to the learning society. So that's one small contribution that I'm working out now for a long time, that the value creation in social capital happens mostly after and before event. You go to your event, whatever it is, and then maybe you meet again after 1 year. And hopefully you meet, what have you done the last year?
Mhm.
Yeah, I did this and that. Yeah, I remember you said that at the conference. So the quicker we can visualize commitments, ideas, new investments, questions that are problematic in sort of events, the more valuable relations you can build. So I think the future economy or future social capital needs to be to build all this value creation needs to be more interconnected with what we call the journey, the process before and after, and the event, the space, that thing. It's a lot of great events out in the world there. So, but what they are often missing is the journey.
Mm.
The Elvis, the great artist, one of my favorite. It was said Elvis has left the building. Where do he go after? That's where the value creation occurs. The space is more to foster and to enable the first part of it, but it's the journey that makes the value creation grow. So coming to real time, we speak about real data and all these things. You need an accounting system that can take into account where the value creation moves after events and like that. So I think we see more and more platforms that can keep track of if you say, the human potential or the human creation over time. And we have those tools today, but you need to figure out who are they, like I said, initially,
Mm.
belonging. How do you measure belonging? How do you
Mm.
make that so you don't end up in an impact conferences with, I have the best framework that looks into 248 indicators.
Mm.
Maybe you only need 3, but the right indicators. Do you feel welcome here? Are you on the right track? Where do you want to go? So it's like I'm more on these, like a few key indicators that really are driving the value creation. But it depends what you want to build. It's different to build a small team in a company, a startup, than to build a neighborhood or to build
Mm.
a region or something. If you come to regional development, where I started, it's more about institutional building. Do we have the frameworks for policy making? Is it fair to look, do the citizen get engaged and like that? You will come into questions like that to build the framework for building social capital at a region or a nation state level. But if it's a small team, it's more community. You know each other, and do we really see each other and value what we do? So it's also part of what I think to build social capital, to be aware what level you operate.
What I find fascinating is that since COVID, since we stopped
Mm,
in whatever, I forget, it's been so long, several years ago, no longer doing our international summits of bringing
mm,
people together and having true critical thought, and thus having very few sponsors. More
mm,
sponsors, less critical thought.
mm,
That's just the
mm,
rule. And I've gotten more done in
mm.
raising money for truly
Yes.
impactful projects and that
Mm,
in the virtual space than when
mm,
I did, doing all these silly road shows. And
mm,
you can you can sit in your underwear if you want. You don't have to
mm.
get dressed up and find hotels and travel and CO2 emissions for all of that. So it's an efficient model and
Mm.
tool, and we have lots of
Yeah.
tools in there. But this whole idea of how do you measure belonging and
Mm.
selling versus sharing
It's
versus selling
so yeah.
remains just as challenging in the virtual
Yes.
space as it
Yes.
is in the physical space,
Yes.
in the face to
Yes.
face. I
No.
prefer the
And I,
virtual for a lot of reasons. I find it
yeah.
much more efficient than the face to
Yeah. Yeah. Because people are freak. You can turn them off if you don't like them. You can just block them. But in the normal, in the physical world, you will be face to face, so it's harder.
face.
So I would say with a lot of friction with people, and it's no when you build trust, for example, if you go to the mountains or I mean hard conditions where you really need to be vulnerable to survive,
Right.
then you build trust very effectively in that circumstance. So I think it's also quality there. If you want to build, if you go into the future of building communities, physical, digital, it will be a little bit different qualities depending on if you build a physical space with a digital space. Belonging, of course, we have better technology, so people will start to feel more. We can have parties online on Fridays, and like start to feel a certain belongingness to something, but you can smell, you have more senses, you can smell the coffee, you can do more things. It feels more real in a way to be in a physical space. But it's more where we move right now. So how we design the overall architecture of the space, and the space is widening. It's not only physical space these days, it's many qualities in between. I was always of the since beginning that I before COVID, a lot of people said it's not real. Real is in the physical world. For me, real is also in the digital world. It has real consequences. So I think what reality is, it will also shift our ontological view of reality with the emergence of the digital tools. So that's also something to take into account if you want to be a community or a platform builder. And you said initially something around DAO there,
Yeah,
decentralized
yeah, we've
autonomous
been looking
organization.
at this. Mike Sam is
Yeah, yeah.
used to
But
work in the
but see
music.
there, if you speak about that, if you look at the electronic grid, for
Mhm.
example,
Okay.
you can see that's more a network in my perspective. It's the infrastructure you build then. But electricity is the flow or the trust can be seen as, do you have the right spending? I don't know the English name for it. Are we on the right frequency? Do it flow can it translate into a neighborhood or something? If you see the similarity with electricity and social capital, the value of relations. So the DAO is an infrastructure, but it's not necessarily, in my view, the community, the belongingness. It's another quality in there. So it's also as a social capital player, do you build the infrastructure or do you build the living thing inside the infrastructure? So it's also find your role within this system, the platform, whatever you call it, platform economy or new economy.
Do
Do you
you
see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Do you are you running your own community?
I'm more like a catalyzer today. I'm more
Troublemaker.
looking in. Well, it's I have been part of starting up many communities with other people. So I like to start up to like create this enabling condition. Uh, but then the best when I see a bit success is that I can see it continues. That community takes on its own life, and you don't need to be in charge and sit there and filter what can be shared or not. Nothing. It's more the seeding period in the beginning, like a startup community builder of something like that. I don't find a better name there. Uh, so that's a little bit where I see my role into this platform slash community networked social capital.
One of the I think the woman was commenting that you're totally non-judgmental.
Not totally, but
Well, I mean, it would practically be somebody try to run you down with a car and then stab you 16 times before you'll say anything. Um, don't you ever get disappointed?
well, a little bit, but not super much, to
Hmm.
be honest. Like I said in the beginning, and that is where academy has helped also. You can't be
Which
critical. I
academy?
mean, it's part of the critical. Some people, like when I start my PhD courses, some people they couldn't take the critique.
Yeah.
Like I remember when we had a professor one time in organization theory, and he said one of the doctor students said, "But this red underline everywhere and what I have written is critique everywhere. Is haven't I done anything good?" And the professor said, "Yeah, but you're a doctoral student. You're
Hmm.
here. You must realize that you're good already. It's the critique you are here for." That person finished because it was a woman in that case. But I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. But if you can't take critique, it's very hard to be academic. So you need to separate this personal thing with the other thing. And that has helped in dealing with what you said there. Don't you feel disappointed or something? It's part of the human nature, the way we will. And if you want to build convening open spaces, you have this concept of Creative Commons or commons. People cannot come in and steal the space. So that's also part of the game. If you want to build a great party, you will have some people coming in and take the fruits. But the other option is that you close the room and don't let them in. So you need to balance the open with the closed, and you will have some rotten eggs inside the space. I believe it's better with open systems than closed systems. So
Hmm.
that's my take on it. There will be more positive effects than negative overall, generally. But the option of closing the room would be worse than someone, if you see what I mean,
Hmm.
stealing a few something inside. I will, and the way to deal with it is to be with people you like more in the room. You can create a room, but to build this enabling condition, you need also to be open to get as many brains and potential as possible to enter the room.
So, but it's difficult. It's a difficult balancing act to one have open, but at the
Yeah.
same time filter
Yes. Mm.
to find that fine balance that
Mm.
this community is inclusive but
Yeah.
demanding.
Yeah. But and there's been a lot of research looking at building the moon shuttles, the rockets, and everything in different stages of innovation. It will be more beneficial if you have an open community or open space, brainstorming, get new perspectives. like that. It's very good to have a lot of people involved, different perspectives. Later in the stage, you need to close the room more to work on the innovation, to have the few people who are really into the and know what they're doing. And maybe when you come to the marketing stage later, you want to spread again. So that would be a traditional product or market cycle of the innovation. So if you want to be more of a managing social capital, you would be into that sort of where am I in the cycle?
Can you give an example of a community that you know that's getting it right? In the virtual world.
When you say right, it
Or
depends what you mean with right.
okay, that in your opinion that it's inclusive, they're sharing. It might not be in the thousands, but they seem to have found the right balance of embracing diversity at the same time
Probably you
engaging.
need to go to the organization, but of course, let's say Burning Man.
Ah,
Of course,
really?
it costs a lot of money to go
Okay.
there, but still, over many, many years, they attract a lot of people. It has spread to other parts of the world, engages the community in many places. You know,
Mhm.
they build it a whole year to take this trip to Burning Man to show what they have done. So that would be one example.
Hmm.
Uh, Looking back 20 years or something to seem quite dynamic. They have been able to build their way of doing things based on the principles they have.
Hmm.
But I mean, community for me, it could be 5, 6 people,
Okay.
and it could be very close, but they achieve everything they need. I mean, we have literally millions of communities around the world working in the rural areas, and I think they work pretty well. So I don't think there's a lack of great communities out there. The problem with communities over time is, if you go to the concept of homophilia theory, is that more and more communities over time become more and more like-minded. So you attract to people who are like you because it's easier.
Mm. Yeah.
And the problem with that is that we speak about three types of social capital: bonding, bridging, and linking social capital. Bonding is sort of the community social capital, coming together, the family. We know each other very well here. It's a lot of routines. You don't need to speak because the norms are there. You know how to deal with things. So it works by itself. It's almost like a structural capital into it. This is how we do it here. Uh, the problem with those communities over time that they tend to be smaller and smaller, and they don't let the new blood into the room.
Mm.
So you have a force that gravitates to become like-minded or bonding social capital. The bridging social capital is more like, you can say, let's say football, soccer.
Mm.
You have a lot of, I'm a Liverpool fan for all the Manchester U supporters. So we have, I mean, if you love soccer, for example, I have
Hmm.
Liverpool fans around the world. Maybe I never spoke to them, but you have clubs all over the place. So if I would go to Tokyo and meet a Liverpool supporter club, we would immediately have something to discuss, even though I don't know the people. And that will bring you into the culture and like open up. So that's the bridging social capital. You don't know each other, maybe a little bit online these days, looking at the same game or something, but you have the same interest. And that provides more blood into your ecosystem. And then we have the third dimension, which is the power relation, which is the hardest to build. The access to political decisions to build something, or to the money, or to the wealth. So in order to build effective social capital, this is elements that are important to understand, that there are different strategies for different social capital forms. The bonding reserve, the belonging part is more of being a servant, facilitator, welcome. The bridging is more of the explorer. how do I get out in the world? It's more risk taking to go to another city or to another country or to go to Turkey, as I was in last week, to requires more of risk taking. That's also the reason why we have more bonding social capital, because it's a risk to go out there. It's easier to be with the people you know. And the linking is hard because that's the power. They don't let you into the room. So it needs a bit more manipulative technique to get in those rooms. And you need all these three types of capital in order to build something in society. Because you can have a great ID, great belonging, but you don't have any resources. You are not allowed to build a house you dream about, or you don't get the funding or something. Then you can't realize the potential. So to build this digital or physical, you should have a strategy to invest in these three types of social capital: bonding, bridging, and linking. You find a lot of information on that if you look in academic sources. Some people would say that linking social capital is not social capital because it's unbalanced. It's more power. It's not a reciprocity, you can say, a relational, because you are dependent on the power. You see, bridging social capital. If I go to football's Liverpool club in Tokyo, you will be on equal terms. It's more the football, the soccer that ties you together. But if you go to power and you go to a billionaire and then you feel like he decides or she decides, it's an unbalanced relation. Some people would say that that type of relation would not fulfill the quality or the definition of social capital. But still, it's there.
When is there reciprocity?
Reciprocity is that you build mutuality over time. Now we haven't gone that much into the impact economy, the social capital
For the
investment, and
next
like that.
for the next
But I would say
masterclass.
also it's why it's so difficult in the impact investing space and like that, because, for example, the traditional economy is about transactions,
Mm,
efficiency, risk, and return.
mhm,
But social capital is relations. So it's not, I believe that language is important in transformation, and social capital relations is not transactional.
yeah.
So the day you start to speak about deal making and how many deals do we do, that kills, in a way, community and relations. So it's more of an organic building. So it's paradoxical and difficult to build these spaces. On the one hand, you need the finance. On the other hand, you want to be genuine, and it's only about sharing reality somewhere in between.
Mm. But the at least in the sector that I'm working at, the financial sector, they're mainly hunters.
Mm,
Some are
mm, mm.
pirates,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
they're not farmers. It's not about
Mm,
long-term nurturing. It's about they're incentivized for
yeah,
short-term
yeah, yeah, yeah.
behavior, and they're
Mm,
looking for relationships which lead to transactions,
mm, mm,
pretending to try to keep that period of time they develop the
mm.
relationship, which leads to a deal, because that's
Yeah,
just the nature of their work.
yeah. Mm, mm, mm. And that has been a bit interesting from my point of view, starting looking at the Nordic way or the
Yeah.
Nordic model. If you want to Google, you can go to the Nordic way from 2011, an article. What constitutes the Nordic way, or Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland,
Mm,
some similarities. But I think the welfare state, we have a strong nation. It's a high focused on individuality. You can be an individual
mhm.
and cope with what you're doing inside the system. But having that starting point and then go out and meet people in the, like I met Colin, who's here. The first time I was outside Sweden looking at social capital was at SoCal. and 2009 first time. So just about when the social capital markets and started, and had a conversation with Kevin Jones there, was one of the first, and Colin, they were the two first. Because I looked from Sweden, social capital, and the only two organizations that I found in the world at that time working explicitly with social capital from a practice standpoint, not indirectly,
No.
was the Assist Social Capital with Colin in Scotland and Social Capital Markets in San Francisco. So, of course, a lot of people, academics and everything, have done it. They work with social capital, but they haven't used maybe the term. So, but that have followed me ever since, because the Nordic way of doing it is very different from US or UK, the Anglo-American way of doing things, and India and Pakistan and around Africa. So that's also something that is we have. I would say the Nordic countries, we have matured. That's my way of looking into it. We have internalized social capital into the institutions. So we are sort of a social enterprise as a state. So when you listen to politicians in Sweden, for example, speaking, and a social entrepreneur at your conference or SOCAP or Catapult, they have the same language. So this is how we solve problems. But it's very different how you do it in terms of having built a welfare system with thousands of schools, or do you be a social enterprise or a social housing project in Ghana? So different approaches there, but also a bit different maturity and different institutional building over time.
Mm-hmm. We're coming toward. We're actually went over the time that I promised. I wouldn't take more than an hour, so we'll have to do a follow-up masterclass. Well, we'll be sending out the replay for those who attended live, and those that will watch the replay. I'll also include the report of all of the comments, because there were so many comments, it was hard to keep track of them. So I'll include that when I send that out. If you want me to add anything about the work that you're doing, just send it to me in a mail, and I usually send out the replay link a couple hours after this. And what can we do to help you?
Nothing exactly now, but I would I thought that it would be hard to cover everything in 1 hour. So I would be glad to go deeper in, for example, how to use mobile phone to build social capital, or more techniques.
Okay, that's fine.
How do you filter it? Because I know that's very useful for a lot of people. How do you filter? Very practical things of how do you find the people, and how do you filter information and knowledge? So that would be one suggestion whenever it could be possible. Yeah.
But let's take a group selfies, and then we'll jump into the virtual mixer. So here, let me do. So all you need to do is just wave to the camera and take a photo, and then the system will connect you to. We will send you a copy of that with everyone included. I want to thank Bert-Ola for a brilliant conversation. Also, everyone who put comments in the chat area. And I want to thank our entire production crew for making this webinar possible. Sam, our producer, crypto genius and ramen critic. Ricky, my absolute better half with no filter. Xi Jinping, our head of transparency and integrity. Vladimir Putin, our head of conflict resolution. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Nobel Prize winner for stupidity. Elon Musk, our humility coach. And Donald Trump, our prison inmate fashion advisor. So just wave to the camera, and we will stop here shortly. And then just stay in the system, and the system will connect you with someone else for a 5-minute video chat. And then you'll get an overview of everybody that you met, and you can follow up with that person. It'll give you a link to their either LinkedIn or other account. So I'm going to end the group selfie here. Yes. And I will send everybody this. So let's just jump into the mixer and enjoy.